If it's Monday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern, it's time for Monday Domains, the best show on Monday mornings on Clubhouse. You know what? I'm going to go further than that. I'm going to say this is the best show in the entire domain space.
The best luxury show going.
Oh, Sam, you are doing a great job of adding the word luxury to your morning meal.
Yeah, you got to have a bit of luxury going.
Let's look at luxury. Let's just take a little look at luxury. Hold on a second. If you guys have never played around with new TLD stats, you can get an amazing amount of information. Dot Luxury has got 2,300 names registered in it. That would rank it, let's see. It's probably ranked number 560 out of all TLD domain names.
You never know. You never know. It might take off.
You never know. It might take off. Sam and I talked about Dot Luxury last week because I had talked to the team that had done Dot Luxury, and welcome to Monday Domains. We're just starting off with a little chit chat this morning. Sam Charles, Uber domainer from UK, has joined me, and we got talking last week about Dot Luxury, and what was interesting about it was I met with the team about 5 years ago from Dot Luxury at a NamesCon, and I was really impressed because at the time they charged about $1,000 a year for their TLDs. And I told them, everyone else was telling them no, 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 and I said, if you guys can stick to it, and don't lower your price, I think you'll sell more than enough names to make up for the the high price, because people will realize it's exclusive. Yet at the same point, the easiest way to get into an exclusive club is just to pay. You know, um, but I guess about a year and a half ago they came back, and now you can get .luxury domains for $25 to $50. So Sam, I guess we're getting our luxury on the cheap.
Yeah.
So anyway, we had a fun time playing around, and the other thing that was interesting about Dot Luxury is again, a lot of these TLDs were picked to be part of the new TLD program, and I'll have something to say about this later, based upon their keyword value. But sometimes a keyword is better at the beginning, and sometimes it's better at the end. Anyway, way to bring up Dot Luxury, Sam. We'll know in a year how well we did.
Yeah, you never know, and as they say, it's always worth a gamble.
Wait, are you saying that domain investing is like gambling?
Well, pretty much. Yeah, when you get to a certain amount of domains, it's pretty much like playing the lottery. That's what I call it, playing the lottery.
Well, I think it's a great point, because I think that a lot of people sometimes try to apply reasonable, rational thoughts to something that may be based upon randomness and luck. Now, there's no doubt that good domain names, you can tell a good domain name if it's a one word, if it's a short name, this, that, and the other. But in the world of the domain names ranked 25,001 to 150 million, I think there is sometimes a randomness, because the thing about domain names, and welcome everyone to Monday Domains, and my name is Paige Howe. I host Monday Domains here in Domain Club. And on Monday Domains, we just talk about domains. I'll bring you a little news of the week, some articles I have, and then I have some data for everyone today. If I can pin my my little sheet here on the top, but talking about hoping to get lucky, with a return on a domain name. And I think that because the system is so inefficient, and everyone in the world's knowledge of domain names is so disproportionate that you can have people that really need a domain name know a lot about domain names, or you can have people that really need and want and can pay for a good domain name not know about a lot of domain names. And at the same point, you can have a huge variance in the expectations of a seller, whether it's a registry or an individual owner or a hobbyist and collector. So if you mix in an information disparity with a huge gap, with seller's motivation of a huge gap, and then you mix in systems that are all based upon what I call passive registrars who don't like to engage with the public. They just want you to come to their website, buy stuff without them having to ever talk to you, and they'll just take what they can get. And so it's been perfect for speculation and new TLDs because the registrars say, well, we don't promote these, we don't promote anything, we just let you buy whatever you want. And then obviously greed takes over. But what I'm amazed at when I was looking at some data about the strings, the words that are registered in the most TLDs, and what I did was I compared the words that had the most TLDs registered in March versus the list for February. And I think what was interesting was how many of the names are trademark names and company names, Sam. And when I look at it, I would bet that maybe 2/3 to 3/4 of all registrations are people just registering famous company names and all kinds of TLDs and still thinking that's going to make them money. And I think the registrars love it and they're laughing all the way to the bank. What do you think?
Yeah, definitely. The registrars are always the ones that are going to make the money, you know, and especially on the premium names as well. Um, you know.
But I compared March to February, and I look at a name like uh, let's see, Invisible Friends. So Invisible Friends was an NFT that was launched on invisiblefriends.io. And in March, it was registered in 59 extensions already. So there's one use case for Invisible Friends. It's an NFT built on invisiblefriends.io. And 59 other TLDs have all been able to make money selling Invisible Friends. And then, I'm sorry, 40 going into February. And then between February and March, there were 99. Now, someone could say, well, no, that was the company going and just doing brand protection and buying all these other TLDs. But I really don't think it was. And if I ever had time, I guess I could do the data mining. And if it is, then I think it further shows that we don't need new TLDs because it further proves the point that they're just adding a burden on any company that has a .com or has a .ccTLD of having to go get this in hundreds of extensions um, when they really may not need to. So someone asked the other day on the social on Friday about the new TLD program, and I'll give the new TLD program zero credibility, except as a money grab. And if anyone wants me to be involved with their new launch, I'll happily do it for compensation. But until they assess what's happened in the what was called the test bed round of 2003, which never got assessed, much less this wide open round of 2012 to 2014, which never got assessed. I think the idea that they would just launch a third round um, just shows that it's an insider money grab. But like I say, if I could grab some of that money, sounds great. Almost reminds me of NFTs. But anyway, welcome to Monday Domains. I think it's an interesting time in domains. I talked about this last week. I want to welcome you to Monday Domains and Domain Club. Please follow me and follow Domain Club. We're the largest club on Clubhouse, and we try to bring anyone who owns a domain name investors, and the domain name community. And on the Monday show, we do kind of news of the week. I'll present different stories or things I picked up during the week. I've been buying and selling domain names for the last 23 years. Um, If you have a contribution, you want to tell me something's going on, if you have a question, you want to see what my take is, or an announcement, if you're a company offering innovative products in the domain space, please jump up on stage. We do record this. For those of you in the live studio audience, thanks for coming. If you're listening to this on a replay, we appreciate you. And if you're listening to it on the podcast, we appreciate you. But when I think about most of our community here in the live audience, I think most of us are doing domain name investing as a serious hobby. We may have another full-time job. And I think that that's the best thing to do in domain investing is to have a full-time job. If you don't have a way to generate income outside of domaining, you're going to not only need to pick good domains and get lucky selling them, but you're going to need to pick good domains and get lucky selling them enough money to pay for your lifestyle, your family overhead, and your business overhead each week. And what that can normally mean is that you may have to accept lower prices to get more turnover. And you're going to be, and I think, a disadvantage to someone who has a full time job. They look at domain name investing as a net investing phenomenon, meaning they've taken excess money from their budget, they've invested in domain names. Many domain investors reinvest what they make on domain names into new domain names, and even investors that have 100,000 or multiple 100,000 or $10,000 portfolio. A lot of them started with just a small original amount of money. But if you're doing it full time, you've got to be even better at this thing called domaining. So where are we in 2022? And we're almost to the end of the first quarter. Have you accomplished a quarter of your goals? Have you accomplished a quarter of your sales goals for this year? If you're like me, you're coming off a very strong 2022, and I have not done one quarter of what I did in 22 or 2021 so far in 2022. And I think before I get to another quarter going by, the second quarter in June, I've got to start making some changes right now. So I think that for most of us, it may still feel like the beginning of the year, but we're almost at the end of the first quarter. So I'd be interested if anyone has thoughts on that. Sam, do you think about different things like that in terms of the time of the year with your domain portfolio?
Yeah, obviously, different times of the year, different sales normally. Normally, this time of year, as it's getting towards summer, the sales die down, and then they build back up after the summer. But last month for me was a very good month. This month for me is not so good with sales, but I always find every month is different, especially in the domain world, and it doesn't matter if you've got a portfolio of 15,000 or 1,000 or 50 domains. Doesn't matter how many you've got. It all depends on the market, and I know from a few people that have got a large investors like me, haven't been selling many this month. So it's different. I can never say 1 year's the same as the next year. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that there's no doubt that the impact of what's going on in the world, of Russia's, attack on Ukraine, and the rise in gas prices and the cost around the world, has probably got an effect on people's spending. Now, I will say one thing about domain names. I do not have to drive my domain name to the office today. I do not have to go and drive my domain name to sell it and deliver it to somebody. I do not have to pay gasoline to hold my domain name in inventory. And so investing in virtual assets is an advantage in this case, in that we're not dependent, as you might be if you were a salesman, a manufacturer's rep, a company owner, a business person commuting. You're not as dependent maybe on the price of energy and gas. I guess you have to still heat your home and everything, but I've said it before, domain names are an amazing asset. They work for you 24/7, 365. They don't need vacations. They don't get sick. They don't get on the celebrity pages for being out at 2 in the morning in an inappropriate relationship. Your brand does not make an accidental bad tweet that can hurt the perception of your company. And I think a domain name is a unique asset in that regard. Um, I'm a homer for domain names, and a lot of what I do here in Domain Club is just talking about the benefits of domain names. And one of the ways I forgot to share with everybody was just 3 weeks, or no, 5 weeks ago was the Super Bowl, and it was at SoFi Stadium in Los Angeles. And SoFi is a DeFi company, a consumer finance company that's really killing it, to use a parlance of today's times, in that they've both connected the crypto community, the investing community, along with traditional products. And it was fascinating how they did it. They started building customer relationships with their student loan refinance product. And so, if you think about it, even though they were selling student loans at the beginning and refinancing student loans, what an amazing position that put them in when it came to offering all these other products. But the CEO was on an interview during the Super Bowl right before, and he said something amazing, and I just want to slow down so I think everyone can just take this in. Because it's obvious, but the way he said it was really interesting. He simply said, all of our millions of customers do all their banking and trading with their fingers on a computer or a mobile device. And we can skip over that. And we can just say that we all know it. But really think about it. In banking, a trip to the bank, going to the bank to deposit a check, to endorse a check, to get cash, was an errand, was a trip. Um, I think the banks contributed to people moving toward mobile because they stopped providing any level of customer service in the branches, at least for me at a big bank. Even when you were in the bank branch, if you had a problem with your account, they sent you to a phone to call the customer service department. So they almost condition people to use the ATMs and to do everything they could without using the bank. So now, when you have these new companies come around and show people what can be done on a computer and digitally, he just said it so easily. He said, all of our consumers, all of our customers do their business with us on a computer or on their handheld device. And if you think about what we have with domain names, we have the functional thing that is absolutely necessary for any company's web presence to be able to conduct their business, to be able to market their business, to be able to transact their business. And the reason I believe that domain names will continue to have increasing value is that the only way that a company's system can be interrelated to everyone else's app or system or all the other service providers that provide ancillary products is through the domain name system. In other words, I may be selling you a credit card, but I need to get your credit score. I need to access the credit score company. And able to let you research stocks, I need to let you go get stock research information on a company. And able to do crypto trading, you need to be able to hook up your wallet. You need to be able to get your wallet by downloading your wallet. If you could only download your wallet from a domain name system that doesn't work right now, because it's only going to work in the future if everybody gets a new browser, all those companies couldn't start doing business right now. If you couldn't communicate your NFT project right now using a domain name on the existing ICANN system, you would be disregarding 99.99% of your customers if you only dealt with customers that could look on an alternate route or new Web3 domain system. All these companies, to be able to work together and not have to individually negotiate relationships with every other company to work on their app, the way they all work together is by using the domain name system, the original internet app. The original internet app that allows anybody in the world to type in a domain name and get the one and only authorized source of content for the information, resource, bot, widget, app, or whatever is on that domain name. And it all works together for free in the extent that every call to a domain name to pull information, because that's all you're really doing. If you go to domain.club, your computer asks domain.club for information, and domain.club sends your computer or device information. They're never really connected. It's a send and receive function. And that works on every computer. And to do that, that information has to travel over wires and routers and amplifiers and all kinds of hardware that also has to use one and only one list to know where that information is being requested from and where that information is being sent to. And unless we want to all remember everyone's IP addresses, the domain name system lets us transfer these numbers where a resource may be located at your hosting company, and your hosting company may have an IP address of 169.132.911.632. Unless we want to remember those, we use a natural language system to convert natural language, easy to remember words, starting with ASCII characters. Now we've moved into IDNs, that every device and every piece of hardware that transmits the information off the internet uses. That's the power, that's the basic power of the domain name system. And it hasn't changed since the mid 90s. And it works. And we've got some variations in China and Russia and Iran, but it works. And that's what you're selling people access to when you sell them a domain name. And that's what you're buying when you buy a domain name. And you don't have to be of a certain class. You may have to be of a certain age just to buy something with a credit card. You can be any gender, any color, from any part of the world, from any upbringing. You can be working for a company or yourself and own a connection to every other resource on the internet for a domain name for a fixed annual cost of between $9 and $35 a year, depending on the retailer that you buy your domain name from. Now, the new TLDs have come along and they charge between $20,000 and $10,000 a year. But I'm still talking about .com. And the reason .com, if you're listening to this for the first time, just learning about domain names, or you're just kind of listening to me and you're doing your work, .com is where companies gravitated because when the original addressing system was created, it was first created geographically. Remember, we had this situation where people had all these IP addresses. I had to remember Sam's IP address if I wanted to send Sam a message or connect with his computer. He had to remember mine. And then each person might make their list of little nicknames. I might call Sam's website Sam, but somebody else may call it Sam C. So they came up with this idea that what if we had one list of the nicknames or the domain names that we used and we all used the same list? So they said, okay, how are we going to do that? And they came up with a system of having a word to the left of the dot, and then a dot, and then a word to the right of the dot. And the word to the right of the dot would be called a top level domain. They originally allocated those throughout the world based upon countries that were in the phone system. And in the phone system, every country has a calling code. Like when you dial different countries, you say +1 or +44 or +52. They said, okay, we'll give every one of those countries their 2-letter abbreviation. And that's how UK got UK and CA and .US and .AU. And then they said, but what about companies that do business all around the world? They said, let's invent some generic top level domains that aren't tied to the country that you're doing business in. It'd be like if you were sending a snail mail, a letter to somebody, and you wrote their street address and their city and their state and their zip code. And then someone said, no, 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 no. You can just put it in the mailbox and just put on it a name and it'll find that person. And that's really what a generic top level domain does is they say, we're going to create com, net, and org, and gov, and edu, and a couple others. I think mil and int. And those are for companies that do business around the world. Now, the reason .com was taken in the US so much is the .us extension was really complicated when it was given out. Someone decided that the US was too big to have just one domain space, so they need to break it up into 50 states. And then someone decided that each one of those 50 states should break their little internets into commercial, government, organizational. And you had this really complicated 5-layer system with little governors running the domain name system for each state. And I think that's why most people in the US, which was probably the easiest place for the internet to start and have wide adoption, in my opinion, was because originally registrations were done through the mail. And the US had a very extensive mailing system where you could mail the registration information to almost every physical address in the country using the US mail. Secondly, credit card adoption was huge in the US. And so between those two things, they could sell the domain names. It's kind of fun. That's kind of a history lesson. This is too boring for anyone, let me know, but I like going down memory lane here. What do you think, Sam? Keep going? Sam's falling asleep. Um, so we had these CCTLDs, and then we have the generic top level domain names. And what I wanted to get back to was the idea that by starting any business and being connected to the entire world, the entire internet, you can do that by owning a domain name. Now we've grown the .com space to 150 domain names. And it's no wonder that in anything that has 150 million, that you should pay more to get the best. If you go to a concert in a 15,000 seat arena, you're going to pay more to sit in the first 3 rows. You're going to pay more to sit on the end. You're going to pay more to sit on the seats with the best view. You're going to be, there's always going to be things that people desire. And the company that's making that thing, making money off it, is going to want to charge them the most amount of money. If you go to a club at night, they're going to charge you if you want your own table. They're going to charge you more if you want a table in the best area. You go to a football game, you're going to pay more to be in the best seats. You go to a hotel, you're going to pay more to be in the best rooms. If you think of all the clothes you can buy in the world, the rarest and nicest and most exclusive is probably going to cost you more. Now, the thing about domain names is the company that originally got the contract to give out domain names on a first come, first served basis, they charge the same amount for all domain names. So you have an incredible difference in the value of these 150 domain names, and you have them all costing the same per year. So it's no wonder that people went in and speculated and bought those domain names that they thought were the most attractive, whether they wanted to use them in the future, or perhaps sell them to someone else. And that's really the domain name market today. It's a domain name market made up of original registrations between the customer and the registrar and the registry, and it's made up of an aftermarket of hundreds of thousands of different intermediate holders, of which there's a couple that own millions of domain names. And that's what we have, but it's a disjointed market. Anyway, that's my trip down memory lane today. Not sure if that was exciting as I wanted it to be. Well, let's see what's going on in the domain name space this week. Checked in on some of the news this week, and I think that one of the topics that is getting a lot of attention lately has been .xyz. And I think the discussion on .xyz comes down to two things. I believe most people have already made up their mind about .xyz. They either hate it or they really hate it. .xyz has been going for about 7 years, and at different times you could buy .xyz names for a penny. And that certainly creates an image of a TLD that's not really that valuable because you can buy domain names for a penny. Now, you could never buy the best domain names in XYZ for a penny, with one caveat. Most of the time, they had already excluded what most people consider great domain names to be in premium price tiers, TIERS. But what that did allow for was if there was emerging trends that would pop up, you could potentially go get .xyz names in those new trends for a non-premium price. And I think it's no surprise then that as we look at a lot of the new Web3 companies, who there's just something about people wanting to be the original registrant of a domain name and buy it from the registry, that being able to buy an XYZ and be the original owner was attractive to people. So much so that we did have some companies start to operate on XYZ. And I don't think it had anything to do with the registry. I don't think the registry promoted it at all. They just have to sit back and collect money, from all the renewals. But I think you had use. And then we've had the much publicized sales of Swetha, who does a good job on Twitter of publicizing her sales. But what we are seeing, as much as a lot of people don't want to admit it, and I have no relationships with Swetha or Afternic or anybody, that people are able to now track that, yes, somebody bought liveart.xyz for $8,000. And it looks like it was like, this is Raymond Hackney on TLD Investors is doing this research. And he talked about that it's the first and only marketplace for fine art NFTs, and they say that their platform is curated by experts. So you've got a company that called LiveArtX who decided to be liveartx.xyz. That's real. They decided to do that. And then they say, well, LiveArtX, that's three things for people to remember. What if we could just be liveart.xyz? And I'm sure that it would have been great if they would have gone to register liveart.xyz and it would have been available for 99 cents, which a lot of .xyzs are available for. But it wasn't. It was available for $7,888 because someone else had purchased it previously. I will say other domain investors have purchased hundreds of thousands of .xyz names. I don't think there's any way that anybody could have predicted this one name, liveart.xyz, would sell for $8,000. However, if domain investors registered thousands of names of good, short, two-word names that go together and would make sense for NFTs, then you may have this name in your portfolio and you're going to sell this name. And the first thing you're going to have to do is use some of that money to pay for all the other names you registered. But anyway, we do have some real use in XYZ. Primitive.xyz was sold by Swetha for $39,888 back on February 6th. It's a DeFi company called Primitive.finance. And whether they're going to use the .finance or the .xyz, they both look the same. Um, but we'll see what happens. But we do have a real end user that was presented with the chance to buy Primitive.xyz for $39,888, and they decided to buy it. So I think you can't argue with the fact that these names in .xyz are selling for these high values. But I will say, unless you look at the denominator of a domain investor, you don't know how many names of renewals they're having to support. You don't know how much time over the years it's taken them to research what names they can buy, or whether they had to pay more for this name because they bought it at auction. And if you have an investor like Swetha, who's maybe owned these names for 7 years, paying $8 a year for 7 years, and has a cost of $56 in thousands of domain names, then I think you can't just sit there and say, "Oh, wouldn't it be great? I can buy one and sell it for 40,000." No, I think you're going to have to buy a couple hundred and still hope to get lucky and sell one. But I think it is happening. So I'll be doing some work in XYZ. I'll be having some .xyz names on the outlet. And I have to say, one of the things that's fun about it is it's taken me back to my early days of investing in domain names when there was a huge difference between $3 and $9 and $9 and $16 and $16 and if you buy a .xyz name that you could get a hand reg for $1 and you pay $90 for it, you're having to ask yourself, is this name 90 times as good as a hand registration domain name? I'd say there's another equation, which is as long as you're going to own a name, you might as well own a good name. So, you might be better off owning better names at $90. But if not, you could buy 90 names and get lucky in 1 year and potentially have a name that you buy for $1 that you sell for $300 or $400. So anyway, keep an eye on Raymond Hackney at tldinvestors.com. He's also on the domaining mashup. And I think he and other bloggers are definitely keeping an eye on these XYZ sales to see what happens. Anyway, hey Richard, how you doing? Welcome to Monday Domains. I hope you're having a fun and successful year. Did I take you too far back on my history lesson, or what did you think?
Hey, Paige, yours going phenomenal for me. I like the history lessons. Plus, it also makes you think fundamentally with how the banks affected driving people online because their customer service, they were trying to reduce their costs, but then they just drove customers to platforms outside of going to the local branch. So I think there's a lot of lessons to be there of how we got more people online. So the banks are definitely helping that. And when we're working with our own customers, we want to look at how do we retain them as well. So if you get someone to buy a domain name, for example, after they buy that name, you reach out to them, maybe they'll buy a similar name. So I think there's a lot of good lessons there. So I do enjoy the history lessons because they can be carried forward and added value to anybody's business at this time. So I greatly appreciate the room.
Well, thanks, Richard. I think one of the things that I fall into sometimes, and welcome, Dave. I'll say good morning to you here in a second.
Hey,
One of the things I fall into is if you take Sam's comment before about sometimes you feel like when you have a sale, you got lucky. You know what I mean? That you almost feel like you don't want to press that button again because what if it was just luck? What if it was somebody, and we've all seen this where they'll pay $2,000 to $10,000 for a domain name, and they'll never change the name servers. They may even let it drop in 5 or 6 years, and you think, well, I don't want, I don't want to talk to them. I don't want to do anything to jinx my sale. But at the same point, I think what you're talking about seems to work, Richard, if I'm not mistaken, in almost every other business, that the best way to get business is go to your existing customers to either one, learn why they bought from you, or two, get a referral. Is that about right? But somehow we don't do it in the
Yeah,
domain business?
exactly right. Yeah, we don't do it to remember if they bought a name for whatever $2,000, whatever it may be. A lot of us have similar names, and that person could buy another name and or know someone that would be interested in that industry as well. So I think again we're sort of always focused on going into the next customer, but can you get that same person to refer you somebody to spend money with you or spend more money with you going forward. So just keep the fundamentals. Again, don't make the mistake the bank sent and send them away to their computer. I even was I think Sports Authority a few years ago. I went in there to buy something. They're like, "Oh no, you need to go to our website," and they just wanted me to leave the store to go to their website. Well, that didn't work out too well for them. So kind of keep that in mind. Kind of keep that in mind, everybody.
Well, I certainly appreciate that. And I used to have a closing email, and I encourage everyone to do this. I'd encourage you to have some drafts in your email program of language that you want to use over and over again, because you may not feel like, after you've had a sale, if you've personally negotiated it or if you've directed them to a marketplace, that you want to put any more time and effort into it. You want to buy some more names or work on selling a new name. But I found that it was easy for me because I had an email that said, about 5 days after closing, I just wanted to make sure that you received your name and you were able to set up the name servers or email. And I would say something, diminishing, like, "I'm not a tech expert, but maybe I can help you if you're having any trouble." And then I would say, "And let me know in the future if I can help you, friends, or associates with any other domain purchases or even questions." And then I might even put, over the years, like, "No questions too dumb." And I learned this in the financial services business, that even though we dealt with $1 million and above clients, we would deal with any client who we met, because you don't know if today's client who just has a small IRA investment to make, or a small financial product that they're buying, a life insurance policy, they may be the trustee for a pension fund that manages a huge amount of money. They may have a cousin or a friend or a spouse who has a question that you can help with. So sometimes in the domain name space, which we can kind of hold ourselves out as digital marketing specialists and tech people. You know what I mean? You can always say no if someone says, "Hey, do you know the answer to this question?" You can say, "Well, I don't, but maybe I can help you with the resource." But you never know how that might be the gateway in the future, because domain purchases come along for a lot of people once every 3 to 5 years, maybe. So you have to think that people in their circle that have a thought about a domain name, that may happen more. So you'd love it if somebody says to somebody, one of your customers, "I'm thinking about a domain name. I'm really worried about it." You'd like them to be able to say, "I got a guy," or "I got a girl." "I got a guy who helped me." And I think that's a great point, Richard. So thanks for sharing it. Hey, David Chandler, welcome to Monday Domains. David was a presenter on the Domain Show, and I've known him over the years. Welcome to Monday Domains, David.
Thanks, Paige. I wanted to bring up something along the lines of what you're talking about. I'll often use in my message, is there a domain name that you've always wished you owned? And I think you'd agree, probably, Paige, that it's easier to deal with somebody who knows what they want to buy than to have a good name and then try and market it to 1,000 people, and you just get no's and no's or no answer at all. So if you can find a motivated buyer, and I think the next time I do a mail out, I'm going to do a mail out to startups and just ask them that question: is there a domain name you've always wished you could own, and it's already taken? And because every week I find different domain names that are great, but then there may be a .com, but they're not really being used, or they're just being forwarded. So I think there's a lot of business to be had there, finding motivated buyers.
Yeah, I think so. And I would even say that your own circle of friends and relationships over the past 10 years there's probably a greater likelihood that more of your friends and associates are going to come in to a need to maybe want to get a domain name than 10 years ago or 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And I think that even though someone may know that you do something with domains, we would love to think that all of our friends and associates and social media connections have heard that we do domains and have retained that information for 20 years, but maybe they haven't. Maybe they need to be reminded.
That's right.
And so I think what you were sharing about the perfect domain, that's a nice little LinkedIn post
Yeah.
that may spur someone to say, I had a question about something completely unrelated to that, but at least it tags you as the domain person, the domain guy or domain girl, and you never know where that's going to lead, because in a world where a lot of us, for every 1,000 domain names that you own, you might be selling one a month or one every 3 months. Even a potential connection that might lead to someone that may want to buy one of your domain names or one that you can make money on, that's a massive head start compared to just relying on randomness, right, Dave?
Yes, it is. Yeah, yeah, you're right. And the other good thing I guess I've found too is some of those people looking for a domain, they're looking for a six-figure domain. And so if I can broker that deal, that tends to be a nice commission at the end of the day. So whereas it's very hard for me to just, if I found somebody who had sunglasses.com, it's not that easy to find a buyer for a generic, what should be a six-figure domain, but if I already know the person that wants sunglasses.com, it's a much easier job for me.
Gotcha. Thanks, David. Cheers to you.
Yes, thanks.
Um, let's see. I read another article, and again, pop up on stage if you have a question or a comment. If you've got a room on Clubhouse this week that you want to share, if you've got an innovative product or service that you're introducing, I always want to make room to bring those people that are creating products, especially anyone doing a marketplace or an exchange, to promote connecting the domain investors and owners who have names for sale with the real world out there. That's especially the area that I'm looking to highlight companies on this year. But I saw Elliot, who runs domaininvesting.com, and he had an interesting post last week, and it was about this domain name deal.com. You guys know deal.com. Well, maybe you don't know deal.com. Deal.com is spelled DEEL. And this is the type of name where I do a show in Startup Club, which is the largest club on Clubhouse with hundreds of thousands of members, where we do a show called The Name Game. And we have companies tell us what their company is and what they do, and what their company is, what their name is, and what their domain is. And then Jeff Sass and Sharon and I, we guess what we think they do. And then they get a chance to share what they do. So it kind of helps a startup person rehearse their pitch a little bit and communicate. And then we talk about how their name and their domain name relates to their potential company success. So we had this interesting story that popped up, and it took me a while to figure out just what Elliot was talking about. So he talks about and says, you'll never guess how Deal is using Deal.com. So Jamie Zock reported that Deal.com, DEEL, was acquired by a startup called Deal. And this had been owned by Francis Carrillo, who runs domaining.com. And the startup had been using letsdeal.com. So I think it was great that the startup that had been using Let's Deal, DEEL, which we would say doesn't pass the radio test, because there's no way to emphasize when you say letsdeal.com that your company is using DEEL instead of DEAL. Now, when you're trying to buy a domain name and you look at it and you say, oh, it's cute, I found a workaround, I found a hack, instead of us having to buy letsdeal.com, which may have been 7 or 8,000 probably, we're going to get this Let's Deal. But what you don't realize is you're going to have to constantly remind people to spell it DEEL. And you're going to have to constantly hope that people don't send you emails that go to the other address. And you're going to have to always say how to spell your domain name in every advertisement. So if you've got a limited amount of time in an ad or on a podcast sponsorship, you're going to have to say, come to letsdeal.com. And you're always going to have to say, that's www.letdeal.com. And then you're going to have to re-emphasize it properly. EEL. So you may have to take 20 to 30% of the time you spent for that advertising spot or that sponsorship just to reinforce every time how to spell your name. And so when you think about the quantitative reasons to get a better domain name, that's one of them. What is the cost over time, every minute, every month, every year, that you're having to put that additional time in communicating your brand, plus the cost of having to make sure that people don't send emails to the wrong addresses. And you may even find that people on your own staff are misspelling the name when they write different articles. Anyway, what's funny about it is Let's Deal, which didn't pass the radio test, they upgraded to deal.com. And Elliott said that it looks like the acquisition of deal.com will be well received by the startup's customers who have been mistakenly visiting deal.com instead of the correct letsdeal.com. So the first thing you have to remember when you go with a two-word domain name is that, one, even though you think, well, everyone's going to remember that, in this case, there was a sense that the customers were just remembering DEEL. And then secondly, they were going to letsdeal.com spelled the right way, because you'd say your company's called Let's Deal, and then people just append the .com. So then the CEO announces that they've bought deal.com, and Elliott was kind of cryptic, and he said it's interesting how they use it. And um, apparently if you go to deal.com spelled DEEL, and again, I've been confused about this whole story, but it's a video. Okay, I'm sorry. It's okay. Let's see. Okay, deal.com goes to Let's Deal. This must be what Elliott was saying. If you go to deal.com, that says shop with an expert. Anyway, somehow I got to a video of a song called Never Gonna Give You Up from the 80s. And I felt like it was somebody who was using a negotiating strategy, the fact that they would never sell a domain name. So if I've thoroughly confused you, you may have to go back and read Elliott's post. And if anyone's got any insight on this, I'd love to hear it. Let's see. You can either email me or put it in the chat. But what it says is, if you're going for a hack, if you're going for a misspelling that doesn't pass the radio test, even now, just in this commentary, I've got to the point where I have no idea what the real company's called. And what I tell the customers on the name game is, I know money's tight at the beginning, and I know until you get your first couple rounds of financing, it's hard to upgrade from the two word to the one word. But I know that financing is critically important, and if you're out there listening to this, you're listening, trying to learn about domain names. One of the biggest changes we've had the past 4 years, and I'll end with this, unless anyone has any announcements, has been the ability to acquire 1, 2, 5, 10, 20, $40,000 worth of equity value domain names, making payments over 1, 2, or 5 years. And what that means is you can start right off branding with a name that's close to your ultimate name, like Dave was mentioning. Maybe it's not a 6-figure name, but maybe it's a 5-figure name. And you won't have to upgrade and explain it later. You can start up. And if that gives you a 20 to 30% higher perceived market cap, that may even help you when you go to raise money, because you've been able to acquire an asset for your company, pay for it on payments, and maybe raise money or connect with new vendor relationships, or get placement at trade shows and things like that. You've been able to swing above your weight, and be more prestigious, and not had to commit the 10, 20, or $50,000 to buy a great domain name at the start, but maybe you're paying $400 a month. And I think that's probably, if we think that domain names and our marketplace in general is misunderstood by the public, now you have a new innovation that's maybe not even known by 10% of the small group of people that even know how to buy domain names. So, I just can't underestimate, especially if you're trying to sell a name in the multiple thousands of dollars, try to get your best price up front. But if not, if you still just don't want to let that name go for less than a certain figure, really, educate the customer on what they can do with payments. And I do think customers, as much as I'd love to offer them no interest payments, and I love no interest payments as a buyer, I do think it makes sense to offer to have your payments add up at a significant interest rate over time, so that the incentive for the buyer is to pay that off, once they get the money, or just to have a sense that they thoroughly own and control the domain name. I know what Dan does is, if a customer picks the 5-year option, they add about 30% to the cost of the domain name. And I think that it allows you to show a very low payment. Someone can buy a great domain name for 200, 300, 400 a month. And then when it actually comes time to buy it and they see that they're paying 30% more, they may have already convinced themselves that they like the name for the total purchase price, and maybe they'll look to save 30% by either buying the whole name up front, or they'll pick a shorter payment plan of, say, 1 year, where you as the seller get your money faster. You don't get the extra interest, but you get your money faster. Anyway, that's all I've got for everyone today on Monday Domains. I am practicing happy domaining this week. Happy domaining for me is putting more effort into buying fewer names and only wanting to end the day buying domain names that I'm really happy with. And if that means winning less names, but being a little greedier on the price I want to pay, if that means doing a little bit more one and done bidding, where I bid for a name, I bid a price that I'd not just be okay with winning the name, I bid a price where I'd be like, I'm so happy I got the name for that price. If I get outbid, fine. Did I lose? Yeah, I lost the opportunity to buy a unique domain name and make the markup over the next 5 years. But I didn't lose any money. Ties are okay. And then lastly, I'm trying to put more time and effort into researching and finding domain names. So at the end of the week, this is my line for the week. What I'm trying to do right now in domain investing is, when I look back on the week, know that I committed the most amount of money to the best opportunities that I saw this week. Not just seeing a lot of stuff that I ended up getting, but did I spend the most amount of my money on the best opportunities? So for me, that's happy domaining.
Sounds good, Paige.
Well, thanks, Dave. I hope everyone has a good week. I'll be on Outbounding Club tomorrow at 5 Eastern, here in Clubhouse and Domain Club. I'm a reluctant outbounder. I think outbounding is critical to the success, especially of full-time domainers. And I have a fear of rejection that keeps me from doing it. But that doesn't mean I can't spur on our community to be better, more effective outbounders. And that's what we talk about in Outbounding Club tomorrow at 5. And then Wednesday at 1 Eastern, I have $1 Million Domains, where we talk about the most expensive, the most VIP, the top 1% of the 1% of domain names. And whether you're buying or selling or brokering or now tokenizing or securitizing $1 million domain names, that's what we cover on Wednesday. All right. Well, thanks, everybody. I'll see you next week on Monday Domains. Thanks, Richard. Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, Paige.
Bye now.
All right. Bye-bye.